everybody? Welcome back to Challenge Call with Max and Avery. I'm your host, Max.
And I am Avery. How are you guys?
All right, so today we are going to be talking about the highest paid head coaches in the 2024 upcoming season. So, Avery, you excited to get into this?
Let's do it.
All righty. Starting off at number 15, we're going to go with the top 15 here. And just to say right off the bat real quick, some of these salaries with the incentives paired with them and whatnot is hard to decipher and determine. So this list might have a little bit of switching around in it, like with some of the guys who are tied, some of the guys who are only like a 0.1 of a million off or something. But this list should be fairly accurate and or close to at least the guys are in the top 15. But getting started with that, we have Big Ten zone, Luke Fickell from Wisconsin coming in with $7.6 million in the 2024 season. Avery, any thoughts?
No, so like it's interesting when we're talking about Luke Fickell, right? Because a lot of people remember Luke Fickell like Cincinnati. He's like the first non-Power 5 coach to lead Cincinnati to the playoffs. They played Alabama and they lost, but they held their own. And then he went and signed this massive deal with Wisconsin, last year? And he's kind of taken it off from Storm. Like, he's been killing it. So what are your ideas of Luke Fickell?
I don't know. Just looking at Wisconsin in general, I know they are one of the top teams in that Big Ten East along with Iowa. But that being said, Big Ten East isn't necessarily all that, crazy superior when it comes to the general scheme of things, especially even just comparing it to the Big Ten, West, not East, Big Ten West. Because even when just comparing it to the Big Ten East, like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, like those are some of the top Big Ten teams. So being the best in the West isn't necessarily the highest of accolade. But this is only number 15. And as we'll get into, there's a lot of SEC schools on this list. So it makes sense. I mean, he has an overall record of a head coach of 71-31, which is, not bad at all. At Cincinnati, like you were talking about, his overall record came out to 57-18. So, like, that's a solid record. He knows how to win. He's going to get the job done. This is a part of a 7-year deal that he has for $54.6 million total. And so he could get up to 7.8 after different incentive bonuses, which that is just the craziest thing. Can you imagine just some of the incentives we'll get into later? I have some of them marked out, but you can make millions of more dollars sometimes just off of like doing your job. Wouldn't it be nice if that's how life worked?
Dude, that would be insane. Like, especially like a job like I do. Like, I work at a meat department right now until I start teaching. Like, imagine you sell like 100 packages of ground beef, 85% in a day, and you're like, oh, you make 100 extra dollars. That would be phenomenal. I would be the best salesman in the world.
I know. Like, some of these incentives that we'll get into are insane. Like, they get 100 more K for winning a game.
Yeah.
Like, some of them are as short as, hey, every win that you get, here's an extra 100K. Like, Jesus Christ.
That's insane. Well, and so it's also insane to see, like, Luke Fickell, if you're looking at his, like, background, right? Just to get to 7.6 mil right now, like, does not have as much head coaching experience as other guys. Like, he had like that 2011 year where he was the interim head coach at Ohio State, but other than that, it was 2017 through 2022 Cincinnati, and then now pretty much at Wisconsin. So like, it's not like a Dabo Swinney or a Mark Stoops that has been coaching for a long period of time.
So yeah, he's only got 8 seasons under his belt, it looks like.
Yeah.
8 seasons with his 9th coming up. So that is a little bit less proven so far, especially only being in like an FBS, or Cincinnati is FBS, but Power 5 like conference for a year now, not even a year.
Yeah.
Like, started in the spring of 2022. So yeah, this is it's a little surprising to me that he's in the top 15 highest paid when it's kind of like, you just got here.
Right. Well, and also it is very surprising because look at the Bulls too. He's 3-4. That's not a winning coach record in the top 15. 3-4. That's a losing record in bowl games that truly matter. Like, it's not really reflective on his contract that Wisconsin gave him.
True that. But we will see how that goes for him. Here's a question for you. What do you think? How do you think they'll do this year? Do you think he's going to earn his money? Let's put it that way.
He might. He's well. All right. So my perspective is that Wisconsin is going to be a sub-average team, kind of similar to Iowa this year, because it's a new Big Ten. I mean, you got Oregon, you got UCLA, you got USC joining the Big Ten, and I don't know if Wisconsin plays many of those teams this year, but I assume they do. That's going to be hard. So he's going to have to earn his money. They gave him that money. They gave him that contract per year. He's got to go out and earn it.
True that. So we'll see. We will see if he does that. Next up on our list, coming in at number 14, we have Mike Gundy from Oklahoma State, coming in with $7.75 million. So just about $150K more than Luke Fickell. Not a crazy change, but he actually jumped over Fickell. He had a contract. He was extended in 2022 where he got $1 million more per year, and he also got $1 million more over the next 5 years. So each year he gets 125K bump, like increase. So after 2 years now, he started at, what did he start at? 7.5? Yeah. Started at 7.5 back in 2002. So now we're 2 years in. He's had 2 of his 125K bonuses. So now he's sitting at 7.75. What do you think about this one?
See, and Mike Gundy is one of those coaches that have been around for a long time. 2005 is when he started at Oklahoma State. So, like, his all-time winning record is 166. Yep. He's lost 79 games. He's 12-6 in bowl games, which is impressive. And Big 12. Like, this is the Big 12. Like, this, it's a little bit more competitive than what Luke Fickell started with the American Conference in Cincinnati. And he also ranks 50th in all time with 166 wins as all-time coach, winning record.
Spoiler alert, not to give too much away or anything, but he is the highest paid Big 12 coach. Like, this is the one Big 12 team that is on this list. So, like, he's making his money in the Big 12. And you say he starts in 2005 at Oklahoma State. Like, that's his first head coaching gig in general.
Yep.
Like, he's been at the same school since the beginning. Oklahoma State, just getting the job done. He's only had, let's see, how many losing seasons has he had?
That's
one. I'm counting here. Not a lot of them, as you can tell by the silence that I'm kind of just going through. I think it's just one.
One.
He's had one losing, and that was his very first year.
Well, and then you look at some of these seasons as well. 11-2, 2010. 12-1, 2011. 12-2, 2021. Like, you got some good productive seasons. If like the playoffs were in that time era, he would have probably made the playoffs with Oklahoma State. So like Mike Gundy, he definitely deserves his contract, I would say, more than what Luke Fickell. I mean, I know it's only a $250,000 difference, right? About. I think Mike Gundy definitely deserves with what he gets paid.
Definitely. Like, he's been coaching a lot longer. He's been at Oklahoma State a lot longer, same level. That all being said, though, coming up with the Big 12 is also making a lot of changes, similar to the Big 10, with Colorado coming in, Utah coming in, right? And there's a couple others.
Arizona State.
How do you think that's going to affect Oklahoma State's overall? Like, do you think they are also going to see a bit of a struggle, or do you think none of those schools will be any issue for them?
I honestly... The schools that joined the Big 12 do not scare me as much as the schools that joined the Big 10. Like Utah, like I feel like Utah and Oklahoma State are very, very similar in the same stance of like the same caliber of a program right now. And Big 12 has been adjusting to this change for the last few years. I mean, they added UCF and Cincinnati last year. So, I mean, they're used to adding these teams in. And like
adding Cincinnati and UCF, though, is a little bit of a different story than adding Colorado and Utah, who are both FBS programs.
Well, I mean,
Power 5.
Yeah, Power 5. That's fair. But at the same time, I still see like Oklahoma State still in the top 4 in the Big 12. Like, because you also lost Oklahoma and you lost Texas to the SEC. So there's some give and take there.
That's true. You might be bringing a few in, but you're also losing a couple. And slightly biased, but I think everyone can kind of acknowledge it. Of the Pac-12's demise, the good teams who got out that ruined the Pac-12 are the ones that went to the Big Ten. The teams that were left and had to figure out what the fuck to do ended up joining the Big 12 just because the Big 12's good teams went to the SEC. Like, it's just kind of it's almost pushing us ever so slightly closer to that whole SEC Big Ten matchup. And like I said, he is the highest paid Big 12 coach,
Yeah,
and he is 14 overall for head coach. Like that kind of tells you what you should think of the Big 12 as far as that fear factor goes.
honestly. Well, and the outlier that you mentioned, definitely Utah. I mean, Utah is one of those Pac 12 that kind of made the Pac 12 as well. So that's the outlier. But I agree, 100%. I think Mike Gundy deserves, I think he's like that perfect 14th best coach in college football. And his pay replicates it.
Yep. I like it. So we'll see how he does with those changes coming up in this upcoming season and how he handles them. Next up, this is an interesting one. We've got James Franklin from Penn State making 8.5 million. Now, the reason this is an interesting one is because first of all, he's on a 10-year contract that's 75 million, ends in 2031. He is guaranteed $7 million. He also gets a 500K bonus, like a retention bonus for staying through December 31st. Where the other million comes in is actually he gets $1 million from a life insurance loan from Penn State.
Interesting.
This technically counts as a part of his salary, apparently, because without this, he's sitting at 7.5. He's not on this list, like he gets booted out. But for some reason, when I was looking it up, like everywhere that I found included this 1 million life insurance loan as a part of his salary. So what does this mean exactly? Like, what is this? Essentially, Penn State is paying $1 million every year to pay his premiums on his life insurance. Eventually, when he dies or pulls out his life insurance, whatever ends up happening, is terminated, Penn State gets paid back everything that they paid for his premiums, and he gets everything else that's left over, which is usually a lot more than what the premiums are. I don't know how it works. I don't know how, but the only thing Penn State loses on the deal is the opportunity costs of, we don't have $1 million right now. It's basically sitting in a savings account for them. And the only thing that Franklin loses is he has to technically pay interest on, or he has to pay tax on lost interest because he doesn't have to pay interest on this loan. Like, it's a loan from Penn State, but it doesn't accumulate any interest. So he has to pay tax on what the interest would have accumulated, since it's technically like he earned that income by not having to pay the interest on it. It's weird. It's so weird.
It's very I don't even know how to respond to it. I mean, does James Franklin deserve all this though? Like, do you think like from his history, does he deserve to be the what is it 13th highest paid coach in
13th.
college football?
I
I mean,
think I think he decently deserves it. I mean, I don't when we look at just the school you're at in general. First of all, he's been at Penn State for a while, 10 years now, 9 years going into his 10th season. He's got a record at Penn State of 88-39. When you include his time at Vanderbilt to that, he's got an overall record of 112-54. So,
which puts him at 142nd winningest coach of all time.
yes.
So, I mean, he's in the top 250 that's on this list, which, hey, I mean, it's pretty impressive. There's been a lot of college coaches in this world from like when college football first started to now, present day, and he's in the top 250. That's pretty impressive.
Well, and then just look at the fact that, like we said, getting into a little bit of biasy here, but just like SEC, probably number one conference, right? Number two conference, Big Ten. Big Ten East, a lot more powerful than Big Ten West, and who is constantly like, almost little brother syndrome with Ohio State and Michigan, the two that really make the Big Ten. Like, it's Penn State.
Yeah.
Penn State's always that kind of like little brother kind of trailing behind, like giving them a little bit of a scare, but not so much that they have to worry about. Like, I think he deserves this money. Like, we're only talking 13th here right now. I think he very well deserves, like he's one of those names that's just always kind of up there along or Penn State at least is one of those schools that's always kind of considered in those very powerful kind of top schools.
I agree. I think the only knock on him is that he has not won the big one yet with being that talented of a school. He's came close. Like he won the Rose Bowl in 2022.
Same year that they got the conference title, which is the only time they've gotten the conference title.
So, I mean, he's very close. The only losing year he has had at Penn State was COVID year in 2020, where he went 4-5. I mean, they didn't even play a full season. I don't know if you can even really count a COVID year at this point. So, um, I think, yeah, I mean, at 13, he's not in the top 10, but I think at 13th, he does deserve it in a way.
I think he deserves. And when you, like you said, when you look at the true facts of it too, technically, if you take away that $1 million like life insurance premium loan that he's getting, like he doesn't come into the top 15, or maybe he comes in at 15th. I don't know, but like he does get lowered there below Mike Gundy and Luke Fickell if you take away that life insurance premium thing, which is just that like that's just a very interesting benefit because
Yeah,
essentially Penn State loses nothing and essentially you lose nothing. Like
true.
it's
I mean,
very it's very
it,
interesting the way it works. I had to look it up because I was so confused when I saw that. I was like, "What does this mean? What are they like? $1 million life insurance loan? What is that? Like, why is this a part of this man's salary? Like, I don't get it."
honestly, I still don't understand what it means. So,
Well, maybe we'll do a future episode where we do a deep dive into it. But I've already explained it once, so go back and listen to that if you want to. If you want to hear a little more about it, we will move on to. So we have four guys tied at 9. So 12th, 11th, 10th, and 9th. There are four guys who are tied at $9 million this upcoming season. How
wish
you
I.
want to do this? You want to list them all, or you want to go through one by one and just kind of do them out?
Let's go one by one. We'll go a
All
little
right.
quicker on it, but we'll do one by one on
We'll
it.
start with Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops had an extension back in 2022 of his contract. He is extended through June 2031, and like I said, he's $9 million is what he's getting this upcoming season. Head coach at Kentucky, by the way, if you guys did not know that.
I do like Mark Stoops. I've always kind of liked Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops is one of those guys that turned a basketball school into a football school. And it's very hard to do that type of thing. Like, I still think Kentucky is a basketball school, but they get known. They put NFL players in the league. Like, they do get known as kind of like a, hey, Kentucky's not going to go down quietly in the SEC when they used to be a bottom dweller in the SEC. So, like, I do like this aspect of Mark Stoops and what he's brought. With that being said, he's only 73 and 65 as a head coach. But how much of that is him being in the SEC? Like,
Well, that's exactly what I was just going to say because you look at this and he's been a head coach at Kentucky for 10 years.
yep,
Kentucky is the only stop that he has had on his head coaching journey. You go back and look at James Franklin at Penn State. I forget how long I said 8 years, right, at Penn
yep,
State or something.
10. Going
10
into
years.
his 10th year.
So yeah, there you go. He's going into his 10th season. So Mark Stoops only has one more year than James Franklin. Penn State arguably has a much better record and everything. Is a lot more successful. But Kentucky, he is getting paid $500,000 more, half a
Yeah,
million more just for being at Kentucky. Which even bowl game wise, they're 4-4.
right.
And Iowa is 1-1 with them in the bowl games.
They are 1-1. And if you look, I mean, he started off pretty slow at Kentucky, like 2-10 his first year coaching Kentucky, and then 5-7, 5-7, and then he started to pick up steam. His best years were definitely 2018 and 2021, where he went 10-3 in both of those. Which I mean, 10 wins in the SEC, that's hard. That's hard to do. Like so, like I think he deserves where he's at. Like maybe 11, maybe 12, like maybe that's where he should be ranked. He's not on the active list, of course, of all-time winningest coaches yet. I mean, if he stays at Kentucky, I could see him being there for a little bit, but I don't know, man. Mark Stoops, I think he deserves where he's at.
I think he decently deserves it because, like you said, SEC, like that's competitive. 10 wins in the SEC is hard. Now, when you look at that, 5 of those wins are against SEC teams. Like others are still non-SEC, so you have to give him a little bit of an asterisk. He is only 35 and 55 in conference.
Which is not great. I mean, it's not great. I don't know if I would put that as a top 10 paid coach in college football if you're 35 and 55 in your conference. But 8 of those losses are from his first year in 2013. If you go back, 8 of those losses are from his first year. So you take 8 losses out, that's what?
12.
Yeah,
He's still got 12 more losses than he does wins.
sure. Which is still a lot. So
Still a decent amount. So maybe a little bit questionable there with Kentucky. But next up, another Tennessee school. We have Josh Hupel.
Hupel. Yep.
Hupel.
Hupel.
Hupel. from Tennessee, also getting 9 million. Contract was extended through 2029 in January last year. That's all I had about him. What do you think about this one?
He's done a couple of good things for US or Tennessee. Um, USC, I don't know where that came from, but
Maybe you
he's
were thinking of UCF, his
yeah,
previous stop before Tennessee.
maybe. But he's done a couple of good things with Tennessee. I mean, he beat Bama the last year. Or was it the year before with Hendon Hooker? It was one of the all-time classic college football games. It's like 52-49. Pretty awesome game. Still remember it. He's got a good program. It's just he hasn't coached at Tennessee very long at all.
He hasn't coached in general very long. He's only coached
Six,
for 6 seasons.
6 years. He's 55-20. I think it's a little too early to have him on this list. But when you get a good coach and you're in the SEC and you get the money, you pay him, right?
For
So
sure.
because you don't want them to leave.
So doing the direct comparison to Kentucky with Mark Stoops here, like part of it is just your SEC. You're going to get paid. Another part of it, if you do compare him to Mark Stoops, has not been there nearly as long, obviously. But even given that, if you look at their in conference record, 14-10. So he does have a winning record in conference. As you stated, he beat Alabama. At Tennessee, he is 2-1 in bowl games. So I think he's decently showing that he's going to be earning his money. It just might be it's a bit of a risk loading it on him right now.
Well, and I'm gonna say something too, but because this will set kind of a standard when we keep going into this list. Longer doesn't always mean better, right? Longer doesn't always mean better because if I'm gonna name a coach that we know all too well, Kirk Ferentz. I mean, he's not on this list, but he ranks 20th in all-time wins. But he's also the longest coaching active head coach right now, right? So longer doesn't always mean better. And
I
so
was gonna save Ferentz for all the Iowa fans who maybe thought he was gonna show up somewhere on this list at
my
the
bad.
end, but no, yeah, Kurt Ferentz makes $7 million a year, so just barely kind of missing the list there. And that's the thing when you look at all-time wins. I mean, it's the same with the Chicago Bears, right? Had the
Mm-hmm.
all-time wins for the longest time, even though in the past 10 years they haven't been great. Like they've just been around for a long ass time. So
Yeah.
like you can't look at all. If anything, you got to look at percentages in that regard. Like
Right.
if you want to look at true, like who is the best, you got to look at winning percentage, and you also have to asterisk it by like must have coached for 10 seasons or something because you can't coach for one season, go 13-0, and then be like, boom, best winning percentage ever, best coach. You know,
Right. For sure. Um, okay. Our next coach on this list that is also tied for ninth is Eli Drinkwitz,
sounds
Missouri.
right to me. Huh?
Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri. Don't know much about this coach. I'm not gonna lie. I really don't.
The only thing I know is that he led Missouri's this past season to an 11-2 overall record and won their bowl game, the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
So I think he's earning his money decently. This is almost a case of he's only been at Missouri for 4 years. He was at Appalachian State for 1 year before that, where he did go 12-1 and win the conference. But I think he earned his money in this just because Missouri for a long time has been kind of one of those little bit of like lower level SEC teams. Like you want to talk about like the SEC being this big, bold, awesome thing. You're thinking Georgia, Alabama, LSU. Like that's who you're looking at. When you're
Right.
talking about Missouri, you're not necessarily thinking that. But I think Eli Drinkwitz is starting to actually turn that around because his record has only gotten better and better every year that he's been at Missouri.
You know who he kind of reminds me of? Mark Stoops. I mean, Mark Stoops took over Kentucky at 2013, right? 3 years where he was not the greatest. Missouri. This guy took over Missouri 2020, 2021, 2022. 5-5, 6-7, 6-7. Not the greatest, but hey, you're there. And then 11-2 right off the bat. And they was it last year that they almost beat Georgia?
Yes.
Like they took them down to the wire and almost beat Georgia. And even before that, you look at a 12-1 as a non-power 5 head coach, like at Appalachian State. So like with lower competition, he still was just as successful in 2019. So, dude, honestly, yeah, I think he kind of deserves where he's at because he's turning Missouri's culture around.
No, yes, I fully think he's deserving his pay just for what he is building currently at Missouri. We're seeing it take effect. The biggest thing will be, does this continue?
Yeah.
This next year will kind of be a little bit of a make or break for it. Because I mean, you even look in conference, he's 17-17. So this next year, depending on what his in conference record is, that's really going to make the difference of like, all right, did you just fall back below 500 in the SEC, or did you actually, step up, make an improvement? Because they're losing a lot of guys. They graduated a lot from this past class. That's so hopefully you hope that he's like been replacing them over the years and that he's been doing a good enough recruiting. Which this also just paints a beautiful picture right here because, like we said, 4 years, right? Started
Hmm.
at Missouri 4 years ago, or has been there for 4 years. 2020, which was COVID season, doesn't have a great season. They went 5-5. That's none of his guys. He didn't
No.
recruit anybody there. That next year, 6-7, he kind of got a young class in, but maybe a couple transfers that he pulled, but hasn't had to, hasn't really pulled much starters or like upperclassmen in. Next year, 6-7, same story, whatever. They're developing. Fourth year, his very first recruiting class that he recruited back in 2020, here they are as seniors now, and look what they've done for him. I
That's
think this shows a great picture of like he knows how to recruit and he knows who he needs to go get to be able to compete and be successful. That's what I see from that kind of just 4 year stint.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he's kind of turning that program around right now. So that's all I got on Eli Drinkwitz, but I like this next guy that we're about to talk to. He's a very colorful past. Lane
Last
Kiffin.
guy, last guy tied for ninth at $9 million a year is Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss. His contract just got extended through 2028 back in December. Here's one of the first times we get to talk about some incentives. So some of the incentives that he will get on top of his 9 million base or whatever else is coming from his 9 million, he has incentives that he gets $150,000 for every SEC game that he wins after 5 wins. Not 5 FCC wins, but just 5 wins in general for the
Yep.
team. Every SEC win after that, he gets 150K. Every Power 5 win that he gets, just in general, he gets 100K.
It's a lot.
That's non-SEC. So he
Yeah.
does like if he beats an SEC team, he doesn't get 150 and 100. Every Power 5 non-SEC win, he gets
Okay.
100K. Let me see.
Lane Kiffin's interesting, man. I like his incentives and I like everything that he has been doing at Ole Miss. One, he's had a very, very weird past, right? His first head coaching experience actually came in the NFL with the Oakland Raiders. And he was offensive coordinator for USC prior. And then he took a head coaching job with the Raiders in 2007 and 2008. He was not great, right? What was it, 5-15? Not good in the NFL. But we're not talking about the NFL statistics. We're going to be talking strictly college. And then he takes a head coaching job at Tennessee. Yeah, and he wasn't great either there. He's one of those guys that had to go to Nick Saban's rehab for head coaches that people used to talk to because he didn't get his shit figured out until he became the OC at Alabama from 2014 to 2016. And then he went to FAU and then he took the job at Ole Miss and he's kind of turned his career around. And I really like that aspect. I like those coaches that had to go through the fire to figure out, okay, am I really a good coach or am I just a specialty like an offensive coordinator?
Well, and one thing I like looking about this is the first guy we've kind of looked at who's been around a little bit more. So far, we've been looking at guys who's like, you've been here for 10 years. You started here, like you've been here. You were at this one school, and then you came here and you've been there. He's the first guy that, like, he's been to Tennessee as a head coach, USC, Florida Atlantic, and now Old Miss. Like, he has been around a little bit, and that's just his head coaching college career outside of, all the undergrad stuff, or not undergrad, but all the assistantships that you do, his NFL stint, all the other. But just as a college football head coach, he's been to 4 different schools now.
Yeah.
Has not been anywhere longer than 4 years outside of
Old
upcoming
Miss.
at Old Miss. This will be his 5th year there. But outside of that, hasn't been anywhere longer than 4 years. He's only at Tennessee for a year. Went 4-4 in conference, 7-6 overall, not bad. Lost his bowl game. USC 28-15, pretty decent. Lost one bowl game. And then Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic, he had a good little stint. He kind of moved down that level. You drop a little bit, and it's like, hey, here's what I can truly do. Won a couple of conference titles, won a bowl game, and then finally got his shot at Ole Miss.
Yep.
And he's had a winning record so far.
Yeah. And like you just mentioned, if you like you just mentioned like all his stops, right? What is the one common trend in all his stops? He has a winning record. He has a winning record everywhere he's went. He's a winner. I mean, even Ole Miss, like they've been up and down throughout their tenure in the SEC, right? Well, it's pretty stable right now under Lane Kiffin. I don't know if they're ever going to be competing for an SEC championship. They remind me of that little brother, like you mentioned with Penn State, that they're always right behind Alabama. They're always right behind Georgia. They're always right behind Florida. You think those three teams right there in the SEC, right? And Ole Miss is probably like fourth, fifth. I feel like Ole Miss is very comparable to Iowa, like in the SEC. Like I would say that is essentially the Iowa of the SEC. And but Lane Kiffin has been successful. What's his overall record? He's
95 and 49.
95 and 49. That also puts him at 198th all time on the winningest record. So he's on the list, but it's, barely a couple more years at Ole Miss. Let's see what he can do.
I'm curious to see how this next year goes for him. He went 11-2 last year. That was one of their the best year he's had at Ole Miss yet. So let's see if he continues with it.
Can we, before we move on to our number 8, can we rank who we think in order now from like 12 all the way down to 9? Let's see what you got.
Ranking in terms of what? Just
Like,
best coach?
yeah, like your best coach through those like 4 guys that we kind of went through.
So of the guys that are tied for 9th with the highest paying head coach, I think you got to give the nod to Lane Kiffin.
Okay.
They're all SEC, but he's Ole Miss SEC, which is just kind of like you said, it's kind of the little brother to the top tier dogs in the conference that are just getting the job done. He's been around, he's coached well, he has a winning record everywhere he's gone. I think you probably put him number 1. I'm going to put Eli Drinkwitz number 2, just like what he's done to Missouri. Like I said, the picture that paints in my head is he knows how to recruit. He knows how to win. This will be a real big test this season on if he runs it back to back. Because to me, that means he recruited a great class, brought him in, got him here, and he's been continuing to do that. And now he shouldn't have too much drop off. Going from year 4 to year 5, you're graduating all the guys that you just brought in that you wanted to be your guys. Well, did you replace them? I want to see if he's successfully replaced them ahead of time and just kind of gets it done in that regard. But I think just with what he's done at Missouri, a school that, that has not happened to much before, I think that's impressive. I think he deserves the number 2 spot. Then I'll give it to Josh Huppel, Tennessee, just because, I don't know, Tennessee. And then I'll give it to Mark Stoops at Kentucky.
Okay. Yeah. Our lists are very similar. I think Lane Kiffin's got to be my number 1, as you just mentioned. He's a winner everywhere he goes. Number 2, I'm going to give it to Josh Huppel. I think he's done a lot at Tennessee in such a short period. Number 3, Mark Stoops, longtime guy at Kentucky, very similar to Eli Drinkwitz. It's like the walk before you can run. I feel like Eli Drinkwitz is close to what Mark Stoops is at Kentucky, but I got to see a little bit more. I need to see his next couple of years. And then he might even be up here. Like he might be number 1 on this tied list. Who knows? But I need to see a little bit more.
That's fair. Let him prove himself yet. Well, I have the faith that he will prove himself this upcoming season. Let's go with that.
All right.
Coming in at number 8, we have got LSU's Brian Kelly at $9.9 million. This is essentially a $9.4 million base contract with an extra $500,000 if he stays through July. Some of the incentives for him is he gets $75,000 for every, not 75, 750, I think is what I meant to say there. I think. no, maybe I did mean 75. Whatever. $75,000 for every SEC championship appearance that he comes up in. 150,000 for each win. No, I definitely. Well, and then here's what I was thinking of. He gets a salary bump of 250,000 if he wins the SEC championship, and he gets 500,000 of a salary bump if he is a national champion. So that's not just for that season. That would be like if he becomes an SEC champion, the rest of his contract he will have an extra 250,000 like per year of a salary bump. So like those are some pretty good incentives. Like he could be ended up making a lot more than just under 10 mil. Like he could be one of the top guys if he can bring LSU to a national championship, because you got to think that also means an SEC championship. So that right there is $750,000 each year that he just added to his contract.
Yeah. Brian Kelly's weird to me, man. He's very similar. Well, actually, longer. So, like, he started at Grand Valley State, 1991 to 2003. I think that's a HBCU, right? Yeah, Grand Valley State's a HBCU. And then he went to Central Michigan and he coached for 2 years. And then he went to Cincinnati and he coached for three. And then he went to Notre Dame and he was at Notre Dame for 11 years. And then he went to LSU. Um, I don't know. It's hard to tell what Brian Kelly will become at LSU and if he's even worth this money. If this was his contract at Notre Dame, I would have been like, makes sense. Because if you look at his record at Notre Dame from 2010 until 2021, 11 and 1, 10 and 1, or 11 and 1, 10 and 2, 11 and 2, 12 and 1, 10 and 3, right? Like he was very, very impressive at Notre Dame. But then you look at LSU and he's been semi impressive, but he walked into a program that was already built by Coach O, right? Coach O built that program up, won a national championship in 2019 for the LSU Tigers. He walked into a championship organization and he's supposed to be this X and O guy that can get the job done. And that was Coach O's biggest weakness. And he hasn't proven himself. So I don't know if he's worth the 9.9 million at LSU.
I don't know if he's worth it not yet either. And one of the bigger things for me is he's had 2 years at LSU. Like you said, they've been really successful years, 10-4, 10-3, 6-2 both years in conference, which that's good. That's great. That's what you want to be. That probably deserves this money. Here's the issue. Those aren't his guys.
No.
like you said, Coach O built this program, built this team, won the championship in 2019. So like he is just kind of inheriting that team. Now, the real kicker is going to be in another year or two when all of Coach O's guys are out and gone and graduated, like they've moved on, when it's his initial recruiting class that is like taking the full reins. Now, how are you going to do?
Yeah.
Because being a great X and O's guys is important. Like that, you gotta know your X's and O's and be able to succeed and all that jazz. But arguably in college football, the more important thing is, can you get the best players to come join your team?
Right.
It's recruiting. Like talent on some level is going to beat X's and O's, because there's no way to X and O beat like a Marvin Harrison Jr. You know,
Sure.
like you're not beating that with X and O's. You need talent. Can you acquire that talent?
And this is another thing. His defense was historically bad last year. I know you're not a defensive minded coach, right? You're an offensive minded coach, but you still put that defensive coordinator in place. You hired him. That's your guy from the start that you hired, and your defense was terrible. And probably one of the worst defenses in college football. Jaden Daniels had to throw for 400 yards a game last year just to be competitive in the SEC and at LSU. When your offense is that powered and your defense is so below average, it makes a difference and it reflects back on the main guy, which is the head coach.
Well, and that's a part of the issue too, is like you say being an X's and O guy, right? Yeah, that's on one side of the ball more often than not. And
Yep.
two, that's another aspect on top of being an X's and O guy is not only can you acquire talent out of your players, can you acquire talent from your coaching staff? Like, are you building the staff that is going to develop and improve and scheme up these players in the right manner? Like that, I haven't even touched on that aspect yet. So like defensively, yeah, that's a big part of it. Because even if you were bringing in super talented players, now do you have the coaches that are going to develop those players and get them to do what they need to do to actually be successful. So
Right.
we'll really see if that comes to be in the next couple of years, especially considering, like, I'm assuming the DC is still the DC. He did not lose his job.
No, he did not lose his job.
So we will see how this upcoming season goes, and if it is another poor defensive, season, are we going to replace him? Are we going to just roll with it? Like, are you managing your team?
One last thing with Brian Kelly as well is he does rank on the all-time winning list. He ranks at number 30, our highest coach yet, with 186 wins.
He has
So,
203 or 283 wins.
well, I think this does not count his Grand Valley.
Gotcha. Division One.
Yep, this does not count the Grand Valley stand. It only counts Central Michigan, Cincinnati, LSU, and Notre Dame on this list. So,
Gotcha.
186 wins at the Division One FBS level.
Gotcha. All right. Moving on from that, we have another tied series. At number 5, we have 3 guys tied for 5th at $10 million. First guy we'll talk about here, Mike Norvell from Florida State. First ACC guy appearing on this list, right? We've had all SEC, some Big Ten, one Big 12. Yep, first ACC guy popping in here. What do you think about this being the first ACC that we're mentioning here at number 5?
Well, I think it makes sense that it is Florida State. When you think of the ACC at this time, you do think Florida State, mostly because they got screwed over last year. Or did they? I mean, they did get their crap kicked in their bowl game. But at the same time,
who knows what happens when you don't have opt-outs that aren't playing in the bowl game, fair. Though, because they want to play in the NFL. And
that's fair. But it's surprising that even at that point when Florida State hired him, that he got hired at Florida State, at an ACC Power 5, because the only experience he had prior was at Memphis for 3 years, and he wasn't that great. He wasn't a world beater like we saw. He had a couple of good years. Well, one great year and a couple of good years. He went 8-5, 10-3, 8-6, and then 12-1, and then he left for Florida State. So, I don't know. Mike Norvell, he seems like one of those coaches that will probably lose his job within the next 4 years.
Well, I don't know. Especially depending on how Florida State kind of handles this whole, they just got gypped. I know there was a big lawsuit going on with them trying to leave the ACC, actually, because they blamed that as why they got gypped. And so, that will be really interesting. But I don't know. In terms of coaching, this almost paints the similar picture of what I was saying earlier with recruiting. He's been there for 4 years. First year, went 3-6. None of these guys. Went 5-7. A little bit better. Still recruited. 10-3. Maybe some of your guys are actually, and we're also talking an era when the transfer portal, all that stuff is starting to come into effect. And so you can turn things around a little bit quicker if you're actively using the portal correctly and all that, whatever. But 10-3, first winning season at Florida State, that's a good job. And then you have your 13-1 season where you arguably should have gone to the college football playoffs and yada, 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 whatever. So, that's awesome. He's done a really good job in these first 4 years. This does paint that picture of recruiting well and doing a good job bringing in talent. And because his guys coming in, turned it around that 3 to 4 year span. The big question will, be does it continue? Once again, does he have replacements for all the guys that he will be losing? Is he going to be a competitor potentially getting into the college football playoffs? I know it is 12 teams now, but even still, will he be that kind of competitor again?
And you want to hear a weird stat, and it's not really Mike Norvell, but it's similar. Once NIL took place, when was that? Was that in between 2021 and 2022, right?
I don't remember.
Around that time, anywhere from 2020 through, because it was after COVID.
Yeah.
I think it was 2021, 2022, when it was first getting introduced. Florida State is known as a school that has deep pockets, very deep pockets. How much of this is a reflection on him as a coach, or how much of it is that they have more money that they can spend on a player than other programs do? Because you look at that 5-7 season in 2021 and they jump straight to 10-3. That's a huge jump. And then they jump to 2023 13-1. Like that's another big significant jump.
And that's just what we're going to be seeing out of college
Yeah.
football. Like
Yeah.
that is the way that things are going. It's similar, but it's also the same as it always has been. Like money and reputation is going to be everything. Like before, what was your best recruiter? National championship. Like we win. We have notoriously won. You're going to win here with us. Like it's unfair. It's an unfair advantage. Now, money is also leveling and also unleveling that playing field because now, like, hey, we don't win as much, but we can pay you more. Come help us out. But then also you get like these giant rich schools that are like Florida State. Yeah, hey, come play for us. We can give you a bunch more money. And then even schools like in Iowa or something, like we can't afford that. Like we
No.
can't give you what you want for that. So it helps and it hurts in the same regard in that aspect. But it it definitely does. If that is what's happening, then I mean, still you have to be the one deciding who to give what. Like
True.
if you're paying players, you got to pay the right players, and you can't make busts. But yeah, that is an interesting thing to think about with some of the current salaries of these head coaches and all that jazz. Is like, are you doing this as a coach, or is the school just paying the players well enough to get the job done?
Yeah. And time will tell. I think at the end of the day, especially the ACC and everything with Florida State, I think some of those deep pockets are going to start going away because they paid for these deep pockets. They had a 13-1 year and they still didn't make the playoffs. I think some of those boosters and some of the stuff that happens with the NIL, they're going to be a little bit more hesitant putting their money right there.
That could be that could lead to a little bit of a drop off. Next up here, we've got Lincoln Riley from USC. This does say estimated. He's at 10 mil. And
Okay.
that does say estimated is like not confirmed yet. I forget if I confirmed that or not when I was trying to look it up. But he's got about a 10 year, about 110 million deal. So that roughly comes out to 10 mil each year. So I understand where they're coming from with this. What do you think about this?
Man, um, Lincoln Riley's impressive. I know you don't. I don't know if you're a big fan. I actually don't know what your take on Lincoln Riley is. I just like at Oklahoma, he was impressive. 12-2, 12-2, 12-2, 9-2, 10-2. Like he killed it at Oklahoma, 55-10 record. And then he goes to USC. He has an 11-3 year, which was really good with Caleb Williams. And then he had a little bit of a drop off. This is a very similar situation to a Brian Kelly, a very, very, very bad defense. When you're an X and O's guy, we have not seen his full team at USC yet. We saw his quarterback because his quarterback transferred from Oklahoma to be with him, but we have not seen his full team yet. So I'm interested to see his full team and his full recruiting at USC.
That'll be the big thing is, yeah, does he do a good job of recruiting USC? And I don't know what Kelly's like offense is. I know that he is a big air raid guy, Lincoln Riley. So I feel like that just kind of suits. I feel like typically when you're that kind of air raid mentality, you typically say fuck defense.
That's
just
fair.
and like I don't know what it is about it, but if you look at some of the best, yeah, like just look at Lincoln Riley, USC, fuck defense, air raid out, like score a million points, win games with scoring. Like who cares about the D?
And it's going to be interesting to see too, in a way. Like if you look at the Big 12, where he had very much success with Oklahoma, you look at the Pac 12, where he had success with USC. He's going into a Big 10, and the Big 10, they're not known for their offense. It's known for their defense. Both of those conferences he was in prior was known for the offense. So this will be a whole different demographic when he's trying to coach his air raid system in the Big Ten in Iowa City in December when it's 5 degrees out and it's 2 inches of snow on the ground.
Yeah,
It'll be very interesting to see.
he is going to that. That's a good point I didn't even think about is, yeah, when you start getting into the little bit of the colder months or in the not as nice weather out here in the Midwest and stuff like that, he might struggle a little bit more because ultimately, what do you got to do when you can't like have a good handle on the ball? You can't catch, can't throw, like shitty weather. You got to run the ball a little bit. But also, what is the Big Ten, like you said, wildly known for? We ain't
Defense.
letting you run the ball. Like they're gonna shove it in your face. So this will be a really interesting dynamic. Kind of see what he does. You say you're super impressed with him. I don't know if I necessarily am. Like, yes, he did some good things at Oklahoma, like 12-2, 12-2, 12-2, 9-2. Like, that's great. He obviously came into a good situation. he was there for 6 years, so he did hold it long enough that you can say like, no, yeah, like he got his guys in, like he still recruited well, like he kept a good situation going. But just looking at the 2 years at USC, you start to question it a little bit. Like
True.
11-3, Lincoln Riley doing the same thing he does. That's great. 8-5
Yeah.
in a falling apart Pac-12 that's
Yeah.
like pretty weak. I don't know if I'm so convinced, especially considering he's still playing a couple of those Pac-12 like teams of his with Oregon and Washington that are joining the Big Ten along with him. So
Well, and like the only, I think one of the reasons that we haven't taken in either or considered is how many players they put in the league, especially for being known as an offensive guy and a quarter. He's known as a quarterback whisperer, right? Like, look at the guys he put into the league so far, like at the quarterback position. Baker Mayfield, he's a starter in the NFL. Kyler Murray, he's a starter in the NFL. Jalen Hurts, he's a starter in the NFL. Caleb Williams, he just went number one overall. That's four guys in the last 7 years that he's put in the NFL as first round picks at the quarterback position. And you're not even talking about the wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb, and there's more others that have came out of that Oklahoma offense that have made a significant impact. And that comes back to Lincoln Riley at the college level.
fair point. I guess typically when you think about salary and you look at what you want, you look at win-loss record. I mean, shit, look at all the incentives we've talked about.
Right.
Win this game, be a champion, etc. Like, as far as your skills as a coach, yeah, developing players, moving them on to the NFL, like that's things we love. That's things that fans like to see. That means you are good and talented. But also, at the end of the day, when we're talking salaries, what do the schools want? They
True.
want W's. They
That's
want rings. They want trophies. Like they, I don't want to say they don't care about how many guys you move on to the NFL, but to some degree, they don't.
that's
They
fair.
want you to win the school championships.
Yeah. And if you go off of that standpoint and taking devil's advocate from my point of view, 2-4 in bowl games, 0-3 in the college football playoffs. That's Lincoln Riley's stat line. That's not good. That that's in bowls essentially. That's a 2-7 record. That is not successful at all.
Exactly. Now, getting into a former Pac-12 college football playoff coach here. The last coach tied in fifth with $10 million is Kalen DeBoer, who is replacing Nick Saban at Alabama. He has an 8-year contract with $10 million starting, and it's going to increase $250,000 every year. This is interesting because we don't know anything about Kalen DeBoer at Alabama yet. Like, he just got there.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard, and especially like look at that pressure, dude. You're replacing one of the greatest coach of all time in college football. Let's be honest, Nick Saban. And so Kellen DeBoer is going to have his work cut out for him, not only from like the aspect of being the replacement of Nick Saban, but it is Alabama. You are used to winning titles. You have big pockets. We will pay for those players to come here. You have all these different aspects of Alabama. I'm curious to see how much stress this puts on Kellen DeBoer if he is worth the 10 mil.
It'll probably put a fair amount of stress on him, I would think. But I'm not too worried about him. When you look at his time as a head coach, he has a 104-12 record. Now, he did coach for 5 years in the NAIA,
Yeah.
which, that's always hard to figure out. Like, okay, NAIAs can be anywhere from D3 bad to D1 good in the NCAA standards. But considering that he lost the NAIA semifinals, won the championship, lost the championship, and then won the championship 2 more times, I'd say he was at one of the good NAIAs. So, it's not like he was at some dumpy NAIA school in a bad conference going 14-0, 13-1, 14-0, 15-0. No, he won the championship 3 of 5 years and played in it for a 4th while he was coaching there. So, that is very impressive. Then to move on from that, 3-3 at Fresno State, meh. 9-3 at Fresno State, much better. Like COVID year, 3-3, didn't play that many games. Yeah. Makes sense. Then he gets to Washington, and look what he does there: 11-2, 14-1, goes to the college football playoffs, loses, but still, just being there, just having those kind of winning record, I think he'll be all right at Alabama, because not only it like he's shown a little bit that he can do it at the FBS level, at the Power 5 level, like at a place like Washington with the playoff pressure and all that going on. But like he's at Alabama. He's still going to have some players.
That's true. Um, to play devil's advocate a little bit, I do like Kalen DeBoer. But if you look, Fresno State, 2 years. You talked about it yourself. He didn't get his guys. Like, is that riding off the coattails of the former coach? Washington, 2 years. Same thing, riding off the coattails. I mean, you can elevate players in 2 years, but are those necessarily your guys that you brought in? Of course, NIL, transfer portal, maybe a little bit. Like we saw the Deion Sanders effect, like with the transferring in, transferring out. We even know Michael Penix came from Indiana. He went to Washington. He balled out at Washington. So, yeah, you know that was Kalen DeBoer's guy, but that whole team was not Kalen DeBoer's guy. And one player does not make a whole team. It's hard. I mean, you say he's what 104 and 12?
104 to 12.
I did the math, and he's 37-9 at the Division One FBS level. 25 wins plus 12, 37, 6 losses, 3 losses. Yeah, he's 37-9. So like three of those, which is still pretty good, right? It just gives off a lot of the Eli Drinkwitz vibes. Like, not enough time. Of course, you did take Washington to the playoffs. You took them to the national championship. Washington hasn't been to the national championship in years. 1991, I think it was. And you took them to it. Now you're replacing the greatest coach of all time. Let's see if you're worth that $10 million.
That is fair. Like, he's only had a couple years at any given place. He could very easily be riding some successful coattails from that. Yeah. But, I mean, first of all, getting into college football playoffs, like, even if you're riding someone's coattails, like that's an accomplishment.
That's true.
Like, you got to work to do that. Also, I want to look real quick. What is Washington's record before him? What did he get? What year is he there? 2022.
Yeah, so 2021.
So in 2021, they went 4-8. In 2020, they went 3-1. COVID season.
Yeah.
2029, they went 8-5, 10-4, 10-3. So they've had some good years. Technically, the previous head coach was there for 2 years, started COVID season 3-1, then went 4-3. So I don't think he was really riding coattails.
Okay.
Like if you look at the couple years prior to him, like head coach was only there a couple years. It was obviously COVID season, so who knows? But 4-8, like, yeah. He could have been recruiting well, but obviously he was only there a couple years and he's gone now. So, well, he didn't even finish the year that second year, it looks like. He went 4-5, and then the other guy went 0-3. And then DeBoer stepped in, went 11-2 and 14-1. So I think there is a little bit of an aspect of like he had something to do to help out with that successful of a season or a time there.
Since all three of these guys were tied, rank them like we did 9 through 12.
I think that you got to go with. This is tough. This is really tough. I forget. I need to see Mike Norvell again because I think he's last for me. If I go from bottom to top, I think Mike Norvell takes the bottom.
So when you're looking that up, I'll go with mine then. In my perspective, I think Lincoln Riley's the best one on this list for number one for me. I mean, the success he did at Oklahoma, yeah, he had an 11-3 year, his first year, 8-5, but maybe that's just because the differences and all the spotlight on Caleb Williams and, like he was a focal point all year, right? So I think Lincoln Riley's still number one on that. And then I think you got to go Mike Norvell for me. I mean, consistent at Florida State. It's hard because Mike Norvell and Kalen DeBoer are very, very similar to me in that same standpoint. And then I'll go Kalen DeBoer because we haven't even seen him coach a game at Alabama. So, like, I can't even put him there yet. So I think that's my top three.
That's fair. That is fair. I think you might have convinced me with DeBoer because I'm thinking of him at Washington. And I'm like, yeah, but I got to think he's at Alabama now. He's starting over. I don't know if I can necessarily rank him up. Like, I think these three being tied with each other with pay is just like perfect because you say rank them and they're fucking tied. I'm trying to think about it, and I'm like, well, I like, no, there is this. I think they're tied in my fucking head right now. I'll agree with you with having DeBoer at the bottom just because he's unknown. We haven't seen him at Alabama. That's all good and fine. I'm going to flip your stance, though, and I'm going to say Mike Norvell deserves to be ahead of Lincoln Riley
Ooh,
in my head for one reason and one reason alone. Ever since he got to Florida State, his record has gotten better. And he's done it for 4 years now, got his recruiting class in, blah, blah, blah. He's doing good things there. Lincoln Riley going to USC, good season, kind of a mid-season, 8-5,
yep.
really. So, and I think there's a lot of question there too. Okay, you lost Caleb Williams.
What happens?
What's happening? What are you doing? Do you have a replacement? Is that something you thought about? Is your
Miller
defense going to
Moss.
step up next season? I want to see what he does now after Caleb Williams. He doesn't get my respect quite. Just thinking from a salary standpoint and a wins on the board standpoint and all this jazz, Lincoln Riley, I think, is just going down in record like that with the same quarterback, might I add you. I'm not buying it.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right, let's move to number 4 on your list.
Big Ten zone, Ryan Day from Ohio State getting $10.2 million. This is like a 9.9 base with the 250,000 retention bonus because he stayed in January.
Uh,
So, Ryan Day,
Ryan Day.
Ohio State, hasn't been there super long. He's been there 6 years,
Yep.
6.5, kind of. Got there late in 2018.
To be honest, man, I don't have that much good things to say. I think Ryan Day is overrated. I've always and that's just a biased opinion. I mean, you look at his record, and it definitely does not scream overrated. But I just don't like the guy, and I don't know how to
Well,
be.
let's look at it from this kind of a standpoint. He's 56-8
Yep.
overall as a head coach. Where is
And
he head coached at? Ohio State. That's it. 6.5 years. So not a lot of time, not a lot of tenure. You're still just kind of there. Past 3 seasons, he's gone 11-2. So he's lost a couple games past 3 seasons. One of those games, each of those seasons, being Michigan, who, if you're an Ohio State head coach, you better beat Michigan or you're not going to be an Ohio State head coach for very long.
And that's why he's under fire right now.
Yep. And not only that, but look at his bowls. He's 2-3 in bowl games.
Yeah. 2-3 in bowl games, 1-3 in the college football playoffs. And that one win came under a superstar quarterback in Justin Fields. Sorry, I just had to mention that. Yeah, man, I mean, he's a very successful regular season head coach. I will say that. Regular season head coach, he's great. When it comes to the games that count, his teams don't show up. And I think that's the biggest red flag and aspect on his record is if he can win a title, I think he deserves the 10.2 mil. But right now, it doesn't give a damn what you do in the regular season. I don't care. You got to win a title, especially when you're at Ohio State. How many titles did Urban Meyer win at Ohio State? Urban, yeah.
It's hard to think that you are under fire a little bit, and you're getting paid this much.
Right.
You're under fired because you can't beat Michigan and you lose in the postseason, but yet you were the 4th highest paid college coach. That's kind of insane. But
at the same time, that's why he's under fire too. You're paying this guy all this money and you can't get over the hump as well. So that is why. If he was getting $7 million a year like Kirk Ferentz, I don't know if he'd be under fire. If Ohio State didn't care about titles and they just cared about 8-win Iowa, getting to that 8-win mark, I don't know if he'd be. I think they'd be happy with this. He screams off the very similar track record as James Franklin at Penn State. Very, very similar. At least within the last 5 years, 10-3, 11-2, 12-1. But do they win the big game? No, they never do. And that's why I think he's under fire. And I don't think he deserves to get paid this much.
Fair enough. He is the highest paid Big Ten head coach. This is the highest the Big Ten goes is right here with Ryan Day. And despite that, he only has, I just clicked away from him. How many Big Ten championships has he won?
I just clicked away from him as well.
I got to not leave before we're done talking about him. He has 3 conference division title or championship game berth.
3.
3.
He has 3 of them. So, I mean, yeah, he's won championships, conference championships, of course, but that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, number 4, highest paid, a little high, but I understand because it's the Big Ten. Um, I would have been curious to see where Jim Harbaugh landed on this
I
list.
know. I was thinking about that too. I was like, "Where's Michigan on this list?" Oh
Yeah,
wait, Harbaugh's
wait,
not there, so they probably don't want to pay the guy.
right. Um, it would have been interesting to see because I think Harbaugh probably got paid more than Ryan Day did.
Oh,
Um,
I would beg that he probably did.
yeah,
Um, One second. Sharon Moore is their current head coach.
yeah, I
I want
like.
to see what his salary is just starting out because some of it is school still. 5.5.
That's pretty
5.5 is
low.
what Sharon Moore is getting for
Michigan.
head coach at Michigan. Yeah.
Okay, curious. All right, number 3 on our list, Steve Sarkisian, Texas. 10.3 million a year. Increases what salary nearly doubled with the extension January 2024 and increases 100K each year until 2030.
Yeah,
I
this
like
is crazy. Like this is like Texas is back. Like they constantly, everyone's been saying like, oh, Texas is back, blah blah blah, whatever. Like they've been out of it. They go to the college football playoffs. They win a game in the college, right? They won a game. Did they lose?
No, they lost to Washington.
Did they? Oh yeah, Washington, Michigan. Okay, yeah. So regardless, like you get to the college football playoffs and you do it like through winning the Big 12 championship handily, might I add. Um, so this is a guy that definitely deserves a little bit of a bump. But yeah, he was sitting at I think 5.8 million, and then he got a contract extension just this January, and boom, 10.3. Like that is earning your money right there. Now the thing is he going to earn his money this season? Do you think that Texas is going to run it back?
It's interesting, man, because like this is not going to be a Big 12 Texas team. This also translates. Texas is going to the SEC. Like at the end of the day, Texas is not in the Big 12 anymore. They're going to the SEC, so higher competition, right? We've been talking about that for a while now with a lot of these coaches. But I do think Texas has good teams and good players built into the program. The one thing with Steve Sarkisian for me, I think is it goes back to the Florida State aspect. We talked about it. 2021, 2022 is when NIL came into effect. What's a big program? Texas. What did they go in 2023? 12 and 2. You know, like, and they're building. Like, they were like this, not doormat of the Big 10 or the Big 12, but they weren't as powerful as they used to be up until the NIL money started coming through. And I think this is a big aspect. But I do like Steve Sarkisian. He's one of the other Nick Saban disciples where, you
Rehab
know,
guys.
yeah, Nick Saban rehab. He was head coach at Washington 2009 through 13, USC, got fired from both, went to Alabama, OC, came back, OC, go to Texas. Like, easy success. I do like that aspect of it. But
He was also the head coach in the Canadian Football League too, which is just or not a head coach, player in the Canadian Football League, which is like just kind of interesting because you don't see a lot of Canadian Football League guys kind of moving it on. But no, yeah, he's been doing some good things at Texas. I agree. I think he's had help from NIL, but also it paints a little bit of that same kind of recruiting story that like I've been talking about somewhat because his first year at Texas, 2021, it's the season after COVID, 5-7, losing season. Not the first time he's had a losing season, but just about. The only other losing season he had was also his very first season at Washington back in 2009, where he went 5-7. So he has 2 5-7 losing seasons his first year when he first shows up to a school. I don't think that's a horrible thing to have. But after that first year, goes 8-5, so he's starting to turn things around a little bit. And then most recently this year, like we said, 12-2, wins the conference championship, and so he's on the right track. But the big question with that coming into this 2024 season is Texas is no longer in the Big 12. They're in the SEC now. So him being on the right track in the Big 12 and winning that conference title and everything, what's that same team going to look like coming into the SEC?
it's going to be interesting. I'll tell you that. I think at the end of the day, I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, SEC is the best conference in college football. Yeah, I mean, we can't even debate it. I
There,
mean,
of these 15 coaches, 9 of them are from the SEC.
yeah.
So, like,
And they make the most money in college football, as you just mentioned. Like, so there's a reason why he's number 3 on this list, right? Because he's going to be coaching in the SEC. Texas wants to be a perennial winner in the SEC. There's not going to be much of a drop off. Maybe the first year, but I think they're going to get their footing pretty quickly in the SEC and they're going to roll.
yeah, definitely. I have high hopes for Texas. I don't know how they'll do, but I want to see someone other than Alabama, other than Georgia, like arguably someone other than the SEC, but Texas just moving into the SEC, like whatever, I can respect it. I kind of like Texas. There's a little part of me that roots for Texas a little bit. And I don't know if it's because they have Arch Manning and, just the relationship with Peyton Manning, Broncos great, whatever, blah blah blah. I don't know, but I kind of like Texas. I think it's their Cinderella story that they finally came back and did it with. But moving on, we will get into our number 2 highest paid head coach, who actually started the day at number 1 before I had to look into some things. But number 2, Dabo Sweeney from Clemson is earning $11.5 million. Nothing new to state here, no extensions, nothing crazy, just he's in the 3rd year of his 10-year deal. That's all we got. Like, Dabo's doing what Dabo does. This one, it was a little bit surprising to me because Clemson, like, I don't know if I want to say they've fallen off, but like they haven't been in the playoffs in a little while. I haven't taken a super big note of them, and like I know they're good still, but when was the last time they competed in the playoffs?
2021 with Trevor Lawrence.
Oh
Um,
yeah, like
so
you've been out for a
2 years.
couple years now.
But I was about to say, like, it would have made sense. Dabo was the number 1 paid coach from 2010 through 2022. Last year, 9-4 is not going to cut it when you're getting paid 11.5 million a year, especially when you're still in the ACC. Like that's an ACC team. 11-3. I mean, especially during his prime, which was 2015 through 2019. Yeah, he deserved every single penny of that. But right now, I mean, I think he's got to take a pay cut because one, this is the other thing. Dabo's came out and he's spoken against the NIL. He's one of those coaches, very similar to Nick Saban, that hates the NIL. He does not like the transfer portal, and it shows. Like you can tell. I don't think his heart's in it like it has been because 2021 they went or 2020 they went 10-2, 2021 10-3, 11-3, 9-4. Like you see that dramatic cutoff and drop off. NIL is playing another factor and I think that's why he's starting to lose momentum.
Well, and I think it makes sense too because look at who you're talking. You're talking about Nick Saban, talking about
Yeah,
Dabo Sweeney. We're talking about long-term guys who knew how to win and got the job done. And for the past since 2008 for Dabo, he has done things this way, and he has got 2 national championships. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8 conference championship. Like, like he's been doing all these great things. Now you go and you switch things up, and it's like getting thrown into a new job almost.
yeah,
Like college football coach had a certain description for the past however many years, and now just in the past 3, the job description's changed. And
true.
when you are like tenured into your position like that, and you've been doing the same thing for years, and now your job is different, how are you going to handle it? Like
That's
essentially they just made his job harder. Like they made things different and basically not reset everybody entirely because X's and O's are still X's and O's. Recruiting is similar to recruit. I'm not even going to say recruiting is the same as recruiting because honestly, that has changed vastly with NIL and all that. So really, you got your X's and O's, you got the way football works. That's all said and great. Recruiting is a huge different landscape. You have to recruit your own players now, as well as players you're trying to bring into the program because the transfer portal, they can leave. Like they could always leave, but they'd have to sit, so they were deterred. But with the transfer portal opening up and you can go play somewhere else, you are actively recruiting the players already on your roster. And that's a pain in the ass. Um, And so, yeah, just the changing landscape for these older, more tenured, proven guys, like, that's why they don't like it. Like, it's basically like hitting the reset button and learning how to, be successful in a position all over again.
True. With that being said, Dabo is still 170 and 43
Yes.
all time, um, 12-8 in bowl games, and 6-4 in college football playoffs. Like he's still a damn good coach. His track record still shows otherwise. He still won 9 games last year, which is still a winning record, especially with some uncertainty that with DJ Alugawa and Cade Klubnik the last couple of years at quarterback. And he ranks 45th on the all-time winningest head coach with 170 wins.
The thing is, he might have taken a little bit of a step back or a drop off with it, but I think he'll eventually figure it out,
I
or
think
he'll
so.
retire. Kind of like Saban
Yeah.
didn't want to figure it out. He'd been in long enough. He's like, nope, I don't even care. He retired.
Which, I mean, and that made sense because Nick Saban's 70 years old,
Yes,
Dabo's 54, and I think he still wants to coach football for another
yes.
team.
Dabo will figure it out,
Or he'll go to the NFL. I
or
mean,
or
because at the end of the day, why coach college football when it's very similar to the NFL? Go coach professional football.
well,
There's been
that
rumors.
that is also a different job description to a degree, though, too, because
True.
we have seen guys that are successful at the college level pop into the NFL and they're no longer successful. And a part of it is like we are talking about before. X's and O's is great. X's and O's is a great way to win, whatever, blah blah blah. And the NFL as a coach, that's all you care about. You're doing X's and O's and you're developing players. In college, what did I already say this episode? That's important, but arguably more important is, are you acquiring talent?
True.
So, like, coaching college football is a little bit of a different game than coaching football in the NFL. In the NFL, they have a contract, they're there, they're getting paid to do it, blah blah blah, whatever. Before NIL, college, whole different story. They're not getting paid. They could technically leave if they want to. You have to recruit your talent. You don't get to pick them from a draft. Like, it's a very, very different landscape. NIL has made them a little bit similar of a landscape to a degree, with being able to like offer money and get paid, and they still don't necessarily have contracts. But in that regard, there's no saying that he'll be successful in the NFL as well, or that he'll enjoy being in the NFL, because maybe he just really, really enjoys bringing in the best players and like, winning championships. But in the NFL, you can't necessarily always bring in the best players. Or how do you have to do it? By paying them,
Yep.
like college is changing to. So
Yeah.
I don't know. If he's against all this NIL stuff, he might not enjoy the same job in the NFL.
He'll just be a dang good, high school football coach someday. Okay. Imagine Dabo Sweeney's your head coach. Whew.
That'd be
Anyways,
fun.
that would be something. Okay. So you want to go with our last one, our number one highest
Moving
paid?
moving on to our number one highest paid football coach in college that I found out about this morning as I was double checking this list, trying to make sure everything was correct. And the reason I found out this morning is because this coach was extended. His contract got extended just this May. So just less than a month ago, he was extended through 2033 at $13 million a year. The first head coach in college football history to make $13 million a year, Kirby Smart from Georgia.
And to be honest, out of all the Nick Saban disciples, he is the best Nick Saban disciple there is. And I will tell you why. 94-16 in 8 years at Georgia, an SEC school. 9-2 in bowl games and 5-1 in the college football playoffs. Ever since, except for his first year in 2016, where he went 8-5, he's hit the ground running and he hasn't stopped. Yeah, a couple early losses in the college football playoffs, but he's won 2 years in a row now. Dude, Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football right now.
I mean, just
And
look at his bowl game record even. Like,
since
it's hard to look at with the college football playoffs a little bit because it kind of adds extra games in there. But like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 2.
9-2, that's insane. And to be honest, before Kirby, like Georgia's always been like that little brother. We talked about little brother, right? It was Florida, Alabama when you thought of the SEC before Georgia came in and got Kirby Smart, now you don't even think Florida is like big brother. You think Georgia, Alabama. Those are the two schools you think of when you think SEC. Kirby Smart did that. He changed the nature of Georgia. He's flipped that team around. He's been there only 8 years. He already ranks on the all-time winningest head coach at 204. He's just going. He's at the very beginning level. If he does this for 10 years, he's gonna be probably a top 15, top 20 coach of all time. For the all-time winning record, and he might go down as one of the best coaches ever.
This is just an absolutely insane contract. Like, Lincoln Riley turned heads when he got, his 10 million, or he got 110 million over 10 years. Like, that was like one of the biggest contract, like just a crazy move. This is insane. Which it makes sense though. Like, you want to talk about any given one of these coaches earning their money. I mean, back to back national championships, winning the conference 3 years in a row, losing it one, and then another 3 years before that. Like, I mean, shit, 94-16 is just fucking impressive in
Yeah.
the SEC. Like, we're talking, like, this isn't 94-16 overall, starting at Division II, moving on to FBS. Like, we are talking Georgia.
I was going to say it's a very similar win-loss record to Kalen DeBoer, but it's not NAIA. This is in the SEC, FBS at Georgia with no previous head coaching experience until he got to Georgia. 7 years as Alabama's defensive coordinator. He learned under the best head coach, and he took over that title probably within 3 years of him being at Georgia. I remember one of his first games, like when he first beat Bama. It was like, oh, the student beat the master, and he just kept doing it. And I think that's why Nick Saban, one of the reasons Nick Saban retired.
It's like, yeah, I'm done. Get me out of here. I don't like this anymore.
And this is the other aspect too. We've talked about so many different things with like these contracts. And another thing, how many players does Kirby Smart put in the league every single year? So not only is he doing it for the players, he's earning that contract for the players, he's earning it for the school, he's earning it every aspect because there's so many Georgia players in the NFL now. They've won championships back to back. They've won SEC titles. He's been killing it. 13 million might be too low for Kirby Smart.
I mean, it is the highest a college football coach has ever been paid in history.
It might be too low.
But like you said, his record speaks for itself. His championships speak for, I mean, regardless of the players in the NFL, like you said, what do schools want? They want championships. They want W's. What has he done for Georgia? 94 W's. Like, multiple championships at the conference and the national level. Like, yeah, I might agree with you. He might be getting underpaid. I wonder what his incentive bonuses look like.
It would be interesting to look. I wonder where he ranks in like NFL pay. Like, I know NFL coaches make more. I wonder what he makes because I think he should be paid like NFL head coach, just of like his success at the college level. But no, Kirby Smart definitely deserves it.
He could get up to 1.5 million more if he hits all his incentives. I don't know what his incentives are specifically, but he could make up to 1.5 million more with them.
Probably win the SEC title. I'm assuming probably win the championship. You know, all the similar stuff that he's already done in the past 8 years that he could probably turn around and do it again. Even a down year last year, right? People said Georgia down year. They're not great. 13-1. And they blew the door off of Florida State in the bowl game. Like, that's a down year because I would take that any given.
If that's a down year, I will gladly accept it. If your down year is being ranked 5th overall, or were they 5th or 6th? I forget which Florida was.
I think they were 6th.
They were 6th. Florida was 5th. And then, to just like absolutely just like kill it, be like, hey, I should have been up there. I don't know who you take out if you put them up there, but that'll be interesting with the 12-team playoff coming to see, which we'll talk about that in a future video, I'm sure. But so that is our 15 highest paid college coaches coming up in the 2024 season. Stay tuned for future videos. We're going to move on to the coordinators next. We'll do offensive, defensive, and special teams, and eventually get all the way down to the different position coaches, telling you guys who makes the most and what that looks like. Avery?
So go like, subscribe. We're going to be on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, anything you want, we got you. I want to say one thing. We are going to be talking about the state of the WNBA in our next episode, so stay tuned for that. That will be really interesting to talk about. Also, that's all I really got. But I always end this show with Bear Down. I know we did not talk about the Chicago Bears at all, but I'm still going to do it. So, Bear Down!